She came as a maid. She stayed as a lover. And now, she may leave as a killer's final witness. Taylor had always lived with the taste of shame in her mouth. Poverty wasn't just a condition for her. It was a shadow that clung to her skin, seeping into every part of her life. Her father had been a drunk who squandered what little money they had, and her mother, once hopeful, had collapsed beneath the weight of disappointment. Taylor learned early that people looked at her family name and expected failure. She swore she would prove them wrong, though she didn't know how. When she saw the ad for a live-in housemaid, her heart beat faster. The Lockwood estate is seeking a reliable, discreet maid. Room and board provided. The words glowed on the screen, a promise of escape. She sent her application with trembling fingers, not daring to hope. When the reply came, "You're hired. Move in Monday," Taylor packed her meager belongings in a single suitcase and left everything else behind. The Lockwood mansion rose before her like something from another world. Cream-colored stone, tall iron gates, gardens that stretched farther than she could see. She stood outside, suitcase in hand, her breath catching in her throat. It was too much, too grand. She almost turned back, afraid that someone like her could never belong here. The door opened before she could knock. A woman in a crisp black uniform greeted her with a polite but distant smile. "You must be Taylor," she said. Her voice was low, efficient. "I'm Mrs. Hill. I manage the staff here. Come inside, please." Taylor stepped across the threshold, and the house swallowed her whole. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, the air perfumed faintly with roses. Portraits of stern ancestors stared down from gilded frames. The silence was thick, heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Mrs. Hill led her through the halls, explaining in quick, clipped sentences. The kitchen. The laundry room. The staff quarters where Taylor would sleep. "You'll answer directly to me," Mrs. Hill said, her shoes clicking against the polished floor. "Mrs. Lockwood can be particular. Do as you're told, no more, no less. And Mr. Lockwood prefers discretion." Taylor nodded. Her first glimpse of the Lockwoods came later that evening. She was dusting the shelves in the sitting room when the couple entered. Daniel Lockwood carried the kind of presence that made people take notice. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet confidence that felt both intimidating and magnetic. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, but it was the softness in his eyes that caught Taylor off guard. Vivian, on the other hand, was a vision carved from ice. She wore silk that shimmered in the lamplight, diamonds that flashed with every movement. Her beauty was flawless, intimidating, the kind that made Taylor feel small and invisible. Their eyes brushed over her, and for a moment, Taylor thought she might vanish into the floor. Vivian's gaze lingered, cool and assessing, before sliding away as though Taylor weren't worth the effort. Daniel gave her the faintest nod of acknowledgement. Neither spoke to her. From the beginning, Taylor felt the chill of Vivian's presence. Instructions were delivered through Mrs. Hill, never directly. The sheets must be changed twice a week. The silver polished. The master bathroom spotless. It was as if Vivian had built walls of glass around herself. Taylor could see her, admire her, fear her, but never touch her world. But Daniel was different. A polite thank you when Taylor set down his coffee. A smile when their eyes met in passing. She told herself it was nothing, just basic courtesy. But in a house where kindness was rare, those moments meant everything. At night, the silence of the mansion pressed down on her. At dinner, Taylor would glimpse the couple at their long dining table, Vivian sipping her wine without a word, Daniel chewing in silence, the clink of silverware echoing through the cavernous room. There was no laughter, no warmth, only a performance. And Taylor noticed things. She noticed the way Daniel's shoulders slumped when Vivian wasn't looking. She noticed how Vivian's smile froze whenever Daniel reached for her hand. She noticed the distance between them, wide as the marble floors that separated their chairs. Sometimes she heard muffled voices behind closed doors, Vivian's sharp tone, Daniel's calmer replies. Once, she heard a crash, followed by a door slamming. She lay in her narrow bed, heart pounding, feeling the tension vibrating through the walls. The days slid into weeks. Taylor learned the rhythms of the house. Vivian disappearing into her private sitting room for hours, Daniel working in the study until late. She also learned to avoid Vivian's gaze, which seemed to cut straight through her, as though she knew more than she let on. Her interactions with Daniel remained fleeting but grew warmer. It was in those spaces, in that silence, that something began to grow. At first, it was nothing more than glances. Taylor would feel Daniel's eyes on her as she dusted a bookshelf, or linger in the kitchen doorway longer than necessary when he came for a glass of water. Once, she caught him watching her as she carried laundry through the hall. One morning, when she brought in his breakfast tray, he asked softly, "Are you settling in all right?" His voice was gentle, curious, not the voice of a man speaking to a servant. "Yes, sir," Taylor murmured, keeping her eyes down. "You don't have to call me sir," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "Daniel is fine." Taylor's cheeks burned. She nodded quickly and escaped before her heart betrayed her. After that, she began to notice him more. The way his tie was always slightly crooked, as if he hated perfection. The way his laugh filled the room when he spoke with guests. The way his eyes sometimes lingered on her, thoughtful, unreadable. But she told herself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. And yet, one afternoon, she found herself in the garden, pruning roses when Daniel appeared. He crouched beside her, his hands brushing thorns from the stems. "Vivian doesn't even notice these anymore," he said, almost wistfully. "She used to love them." Taylor didn't know how to respond. She simply nodded, her fingers trembling as they brushed against his for a split second. The moments grew, tiny threads weaving a dangerous connection. Longer conversations. A book left on the counter that Daniel recommended. A fleeting glance that carried too much weight. It was slow, deliberate, almost unnoticeable. But Taylor felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Then came the evening that set everything in motion. Vivian was out at a gala, her laughter echoing faintly as she left in her jewels and furs. The house was quiet, dimly lit. Taylor was in the library dusting when Daniel entered. "You work too hard," he said softly, pouring himself a drink. Taylor straightened, clutching her duster. "It's my job." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You remind me of myself, once. Always trying to prove something." He handed her a glass of wine before she could protest. "One sip. Just to take the edge off." She hesitated, then accepted. The firelight flickered against the shelves, casting long shadows. Their conversation wandered, from books to travel, from childhood dreams to disappointments. For the first time, Taylor felt seen, not as a maid, but as a person. When their hands brushed as he reached for her glass, the air thickened. She pulled back quickly, her heart racing. "I should go," she whispered. Daniel's gaze lingered, warm and searching. "Of course." He stepped aside, letting her pass. Taylor fled to her room, her pulse hammering, her thoughts tangled. She hadn't crossed the line, but she had stood on the edge and looked down. And the worst part was how much she wanted to leap. The days after that evening in the library felt different. Taylor tried to bury herself in work, polishing silver until her arms ached, scrubbing floors until her knees burned. But Daniel's voice lingered in her mind. "You remind me of myself, once." His kindness clung to her like a forbidden perfume, impossible to wash away. Daniel didn't push. If anything, he pulled back, but the absence only made Taylor more aware of his presence. She noticed the sound of his footsteps in the hall, the low murmur of his voice on the phone, the way his laugh echoed in the study late at night. Vivian's coldness, however, seemed sharper than ever. Taylor would catch her staring sometimes, those eyes, narrowed and calculating, as though she could see the truth hidden beneath Taylor's skin. The affair didn't begin with a single moment of weakness, but with 100 small ones. Daniel started seeking her out again. Short conversations in the kitchen, a smile in the garden. Each moment was innocent enough to deny, but together they built a fire that neither could ignore. One evening, Taylor was cleaning the dining room after a late dinner. Vivian had retired early, leaving Daniel alone at the table. He watched her as she worked, and when she passed by to collect his plate, his fingers brushed hers deliberately. She froze, her breath caught. "Taylor," he said quietly, her name carrying a weight she had never heard before. Her pulse thundered. She shook her head, whispering, "We can't." But his eyes lingered on her, soft, aching, and something inside her cracked. That night, when he found her in the library, neither of them resisted. The kiss was desperate, consuming, a release of weeks of restraint. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "This is wrong." And he answered, "Then why does it feel so right?" In that moment, the world fell away, and Taylor let herself believe in the fantasy, that she was loved, chosen, wanted. After that, there was no going back. They lived in fragments, stolen kisses, hushed whispers in the dark. Daniel promised her things she had never dared dream of. "When this is over," he whispered one night, "it will just be us. I'll make it right." But what did over mean? And what would it cost? Vivian's presence grew heavier. Her glances sharper, her silences louder. Once, Taylor found her in the garden, staring at the roses. Without looking at Taylor, Vivian said, "Some flowers look beautiful but hide thorns sharp enough to draw blood. You do well to remember that." Taylor's stomach twisted. Did Vivian know? Was she warning her, or threatening her? The storm came 2 weeks later. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder shook the walls. Taylor was folding laundry when the scream tore through the house. She dropped the sheets and ran, heart pounding, to the bathroom at the end of the hall. Vivian lay sprawled on the marble floor, her silk nightgown stained red beneath her head. Her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. Daniel was already there, kneeling beside her, his hands trembling. "She slipped," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The floor was wet. Oh God." The police came quickly, their voices low and professional. They took notes, asked questions, nodded sympathetically. A tragic accident. Nothing more. Taylor stood in the corner, silent, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might faint. She wanted to scream that it didn't feel like an accident, that something was wrong, but who would believe her? She was just the maid. After the funeral, Daniel leaned on her more than ever. His grief seemed real, his sorrow heavy. But in the quiet moments, he would pull her close, whispering that she was all he had left, that they could finally have a future together. At first, Taylor clung to him. She wanted to believe. She needed to believe. But small cracks began to form. One evening, while dusting the study, she found a drawer left unlocked. Inside were stacks of papers, financial documents, insurance policies, all naming Daniel as Vivian's sole beneficiary. Millions of dollars. Taylor's hands trembled as she flipped through them. Coincidence, she told herself. It had to be. But doubt wormed its way into her chest. The unease deepened when she discovered the journal. Hidden behind a row of books in Vivian's sitting room, it was bound in leather, its pages filled with neat, elegant handwriting. "I don't feel safe anymore. Daniel watches me too closely. I think he wants me gone now. There's someone else." Taylor's breath caught. The words swam before her eyes. Vivian had known. She had been afraid. That night, Taylor lay awake, her mind racing. Had Daniel charmed her from the start, grooming her as the perfect replacement? Had every smile, every kiss, been nothing more than a calculated move? And then there was Maria, whom everyone calls Mrs. Hills. The older housekeeper had always been quiet, her words few. But one evening, as Taylor passed her in the hall, Maria paused. "Be careful," she murmured. "Not everything is as it seems." Taylor froze. "What do you mean?" But Maria only shook her head and walked away. The next day, a note appeared beneath Taylor's door. In shaky handwriting, it read, "He isn't who you think he is." Paranoia seeped into every corner of Taylor's mind. Every time Daniel smiled at her, she wondered what lay behind it. Every time he touched her, she wondered if those hands had pushed Vivian to the ground. The mansion grew suffocating. Every shadow felt alive. Every silence felt dangerous. The truth came late one night. Taylor found Maria in the basement, rifling through boxes. In her hands were copies of the insurance papers, photographs, letters. Evidence. Maria looked up, her face pale. "He killed her," she whispered. "And if you're not careful, you'll be next." From that moment, Taylor knew it was a game of survival. She forced herself to play her part. She smiled when he smiled, whispered back when he spoke of forever. She let him believe she was still his. But in secret, she began to gather everything. Vivian's journal, Maria's testimony, the financial papers, even recordings of Daniel's slips when he thought she wasn't listening. Every day was a risk. Every night was a battle to keep her mask intact. The night Daniel finally acted, the house was unervingly quiet. Taylor had learned to dread those silences. He summoned her to the study with a gentle smile, the kind that once disarmed her but now felt like a mask stretched too tightly across his face. A decanter of whiskey gleamed on the desk. Daniel poured 2 glasses, his movements calm, deliberate. "It's time we stop hiding," he said, handing her one. His voice was smooth as velvet, but underneath it pulsed something darker, something electric. "It's time to make this official. Just you and me. Forever." Taylor's hands shook as she accepted the glass. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to play the part one last time. "Forever," she whispered, her lips barely moving. Daniel stepped closer. His hand brushed her hair back from her face, his touch tender but heavy with possession. "I knew from the moment I saw you," he murmured, "that you belonged here, that you belonged to me. Vivian was an obstacle. She never understood me the way you do." Taylor's stomach knotted. His words confirmed what she had feared all along, but she kept her expression soft, her breathing steady. She needed him to believe. Just a few more minutes. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "To us. And to new beginnings." But before she could drink, the low wail of sirens split the silence. At first faint, then growing louder, closer, until the red and blue lights spilled through the curtains like an accusation. Daniel froze, the smile sliding off his face. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp and dangerous. "What did you do?" His voice was no longer smooth, it was edged with fury. Taylor set her glass down, her fingers trembling but her voice steady. "I know what you did to Vivian, and I'm not going to be your pawn." Daniel laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You think they'll believe you? You're nothing but the maid. Your word means nothing against mine." He stepped toward her, looming. "All I have to do is say you were jealous. Say you wanted Vivian gone. They'll eat it up." For a moment, fear gripped her throat. Maybe he was right. Maybe no one would believe her. But then she thought of Vivian's journal, of Maria's trembling testimony, of the evidence she had gathered piece by piece while pretending to be his. "They'll believe me," Taylor said softly. Then louder, with steel in her voice, "because I have proof." The study doors burst open. Police officers surged inside, their commands sharp, their flashlights cutting through the dim. Behind them, Maria stood pale but resolute, clutching the folder of evidence Taylor had helped her compile. Daniel's mask shattered. His calm facade gave way to pure rage. He lunged forward, his hand clamping around Taylor's wrist, his grip bruising. "You ungrateful little." But the officers pulled him back, shoving him against the desk, cuffing his hands behind his back as he shouted curses. His voice echoed through the hall, venomous, desperate. "This isn't over, Taylor. I'll come for you. You'll regret this. You'll regret." The words cut off as they dragged him away, his footsteps fading into silence. Taylor stood trembling in the middle of the study, the taste of fear still sharp in her mouth. Her wrist throbbed where he had gripped her, but she lifted her chin. She had outlasted him. The police thanked her, their voices professional, efficient. Papers were signed, statements recorded. Eventually, the mansion grew quiet again, though the silence felt different now, not threatening, but hollow, emptied of its menace. Maria touched her arm gently. "You were brave," she whispered. Taylor nodded, though her body still shook. I had to survive." Later, as dawn painted the sky in pale pink, Taylor stepped outside the Lockwood mansion for the last time. She paused at the gates, looking back once. The house stood tall and beautiful, but it was only a shell now, a monument to lies, secrets, and blood. Taylor took a deep breath and turned away. She was not the timid maid who had first walked through those doors. She was something harder now, something stronger. She had faced the darkness, and she had won. And sometimes, survival isn't just about escaping alive. It's about rewriting the story so the monster never owns the ending.